So let us prepare ourselves. If you'll put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
Now just put your hand over your heart and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is the one that says, with God, all things are possible. With God, all things are possible. And one of the nice things about that for us is it reminds us that we're never alone, that we don't have to do anything or everything alone. So what I know about this church is you're all successful right now. If you want to be more successful in your marriages, more successful in your businesses, more successful in school, more successful in your projects that you're doing, bring God into it. Bring the Almighty into it. Because with God, all things are possible. Now, you know at this church, when I say God, I'm not talking about a formed being in the sky. I'm talking about infinite intelligence. I'm talking about divine wisdom. I'm talking about complete creativity. That's what God is. And that flows through you all of the time. But it has to be activated by consciousness. With God, all things are possible. With God, it's possible for you to walk into any room and know that you are at the right time, at the right place, always. Never second guessing yourself. With God, it is possible for you to have extra money, that kind of money that gets called discretionary. You know, SMUD doesn't get a piece, and your rent or mortgage doesn't get a piece, and the dental bill doesn't get a piece. It's discretionary. It's extra. With God, that's possible. You can do what you want with a little extra money. With God, it's possible for you to actually go to a gym and like it. That's possible with God. With God, it's possible for you to forgive people you never, ever, ever thought you'd be able to forgive in your entire life because the trespass was so grievous. But with God, that's possible as well. With God, it's possible for you to define who you are all by yourself. All by yourself. You know, sometimes it's hard for us to get up the courage and say, this is who I am. And all of you who think you have a vote in who I am in my life, you don't have a vote. You don't have a majority vote, and you don't have a minority vote. You have no vote at all, because I'm going to define who I am. You know, that's not as easy as I make it sound when I stand up here in my pretty black outfit. It's actually much more difficult sometimes to stand up to people and say, this is who I am. We're going to learn today from a story that I tell every single year. It's from our Jewish ancestors. It's the story of Hanukkah, a whole group of people who stood up and said, this is who I am. I don't care about what the rulers believe I am. This is who I am. We're going to be able to have an opportunity to go through that story and look at some of the nourishment that's there for us. Now, before I begin, and we're going to in a moment bring Judy Marlowe up to bless our candle and light the candles, I want to say this. Hanukkah is not a replacement holiday for Jewish parents who are worried their kids will be upset because Christian kids have Christmas. That is not what Hanukkah is. It is a whole beautiful holiday all by itself. It goes for 8 days. And there's family tradition. There are stories that are told. There are gifts that are exchanged for 8 entire days on the calendar. It's quite beautiful. So, Judy, would you come forward and light our candles? Oh, did I not leave matches? Oh, yes, here.
Okay, sorry.
This is for that one.
the other candles are lit from there. This is the 4th day of Hanukkah, so we have 4 candles.
Do you want to say the prayer?
I don't know how to say it.
Okay. Okay, will you say it in English? And I have it right here.
Great. I wish I did know how to
That's
say
all
it in
right.
Hebrew. Thank you. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us with your commandments and has commanded us to kindle the lights of Hanukkah. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Judy. So now the way that we show respect at Jewish holidays is we do as the Jews do, which is to tell the story every single year. Resist the temptation, if you have been here in the past, to say, I've heard the story. I don't need it again. The story won't change, but you have changed. You are not the same being that heard the story. There is something, I promise you, there is something in today's telling of the story that you have never heard before that you need to apply to your life right now, if you'll be open to it. So let us begin. One of the reasons I like this story so much is because it demonstrates that in order for us to go from okay to good or good to great, something has to happen. And we know that in our life. When we're just kind of skating along, we can be doing that for a long time. But when our soul calls for something bigger in our life, something will have to happen in order to move that. Now, not always is it calamitous, but in this case, it's calamitous. Okay, for the Jews, it was quite calamitous. It began at a time when the Jews were okay. They were all right in the land of Persia. They were fine because they were under the benevolent rule of the dictator known as Alexander the Great. Now, he wanted to keep them slaves. He wasn't freeing anybody, but he was leaving them alone. He let them alone to worship as they wanted to worship, to dress as they wanted to dress, as long as they showed up for their slave job during the day. He pretty much left them be. And he didn't hassle them. And so they built a beautiful temple high upon the hill, and it was one of the most gorgeous temples that was ever built. It had a beautiful stained glass window. It had beautiful woodwork. It had an ark in which the Torah was placed. It had a candle that went 24/7 to indicate to the people that God was on the job and always on the job. But here's what happens. When we depend on the benevolence of someone else, it's very difficult for us to grow. It's very difficult for us to move from that place of life is okay to what you were designed to being. You were not designed to be a slave, a mental slave. You were not designed to live a humdrum, okay life. You were designed to be the biggest expression of God you can be on this planet. That's what you were designed to do. And in order for us to move through into that, something has to happen. You know, how many of us right now feel totally and completely free? Totally and completely free. We're not in any way worried about what other people think. We're not terrified to say something to our adult children or they to us. We're not, worried about saying something to our boss. We're not worried about saying something to our spouse. And so we're not really rocking anybody's boat. We're just living the kind of half-alive life that we live sometimes. See, well, what happens when that occurs in our life? If it goes on too long, our soul will call for something to happen to shift everything. our soul will call forth something in our life to be able to shift. So that one of two things has to happens, and you've all experienced this. Either it calls forth something and you start talking, and you start being less slave-like and more free-like, and actually coming from your most authentic place, or you run away. But the problem with running away is everywhere you go, there you are. And everywhere you go, you're going to bring new beings to play the same role as the old beings, different faces, same situations in your life. Well, the communal soul of the Jews called forth the death of Alexander the Great and the birth of Antiochus. So no more was Alexander the Great the guy who wasn't hassling them alive. Now we're dealing with Antiochus, who is an anti-Semite, who is totally afraid of the Jews, afraid of how they dress, afraid of how they speak, afraid of how they worship. And before we get all pursed lips about what a bad guy Antiochus is, we want to remember that we're all parts of every story in every Bible or every scripture. Every part of every scripture, we're all parts of those stories. We're Alexander the Great when we let people just be and let them be free. And we are Antiochus when we try and control people and make them be something more limited. Here's the deal. I don't care what John Boehner wears. I don't care where John Boehner worships. I don't care what John Boehner, how he speaks. But I want him to think like me. And if he doesn't think like me, I'd like him to speak less. I'd like to limit him a lot more. See? That's the Antiochus in me, trying to limit somebody else's expression. We all do it. Maybe for you it's a biker. You'd like to have less bikers in the world. Maybe for you it's less TV evangelical preachers on the television. And you say, oh, they shouldn't be on. The guy with the green hanky, I don't think he should be on TV. He says, if you pay $10 for this hanky, you'll be healed. Okay? But the truth is, that's not my business. That's an Antiochus thought when we try and bring people into, vegetarians don't like meat eaters. Meat eaters are a little suspect of vegetarians. We all have a little something going on that we would like to limit other people's behavior. People who are rich, people who don't have so much money, we're a little suspect of people who are rich. We have a little feeling about them. See, that's Antiochus behavior, and each and every one of us have a little bit of it. Well, Antiochus decided to deal with his fear of the Jews by forbidding them to have their Sabbath or to worship their God of their understanding. Now look, forbidding adults just doesn't work. It doesn't work. We all try it, but it doesn't work. We try it in more sophisticated ways, cold shoulders, not talking, yelling, whatever. We try and forbid other people from being who they want to be, as they want to be, and it doesn't work. If it worked, the Tiananmen Square wouldn't have worked for the Chinese people. If it worked, the Berlin Wall would still be up. If it worked, Stonewall would never have happened, and gay people would not have stood up and said, this is who I am. If it worked, the Arab Spring wouldn't have been there. Temper tantrums trying to control people don't work. And yet we try and do it all of the time. See, our work is to begin to understand that the presence of God is not only in me, it's in every single person. It's in everybody. And when we can begin to understand that at a deep enough level, we'll begin to have a different kind of life on a different kind of planet. See, when we are able to stand up and say, this is who I am, I'm on purpose, and I'm on God's purpose, the world will begin to organize itself on your behalf. When we try and hide who we are, it simply begins to get gummed up. Well, in the story, what happens is the soldiers start, they went into the beautiful temple and they slaughtered a pig in the beautiful temple. It went all over everywhere, and they blew out the candle. And they thought that would stop people from being who they are. They thought it would stop Jews from being Jews. If they could just be strong enough. If they could just kind of put them down enough, they could stop that. But it won't happen. It never happened. It didn't happen then, and it won't happen now. See, when Antiochus brought his soldiers in to doing all that, we can begin to think, oh, those bad soldiers, those terrible soldiers. But what we want to know is, where do we do that? That's the real juice in this story. Well, they decided then to go to all the villages, and they would drag out the men in the villages, and they would make them bow down to the statue of Zeus. And some of the men bowed down to the statue of Zeus. And that's a powerful part of the story for you and I as well, because sometimes we, in order to feel safe, in order to feel part of, we begin acting like something we're not. And we want to have compassion for that. There are people in this room, I'm sure, who have tried to pass as having college educations who didn't because they wanted to feel safe. There are people on the planet who maybe have popped their kids once or twice. And I never hit my child. Because they want to feel safe. There are people in the room who don't want to tell anybody they have an addiction because they want to feel safe. And I tell us all of this because I want us to have compassion for the people who bowed down, and I want us to have compassion for one another until we can have enough faith and enough faith-based courage to say, you know what? This is who I am. This is completely who I am. That's our prayer. Our prayer is to know that we are the hands and the feet and the heart of God. And that is good enough. That is more than good enough in our lives. Well, they got to one village and they got this guy out and they tried to make him bow down, and he stood back up and he said, no, I'm not bowing down. I'm not bowing down. I'm a Jew, and this is how I pray. This is how I live my life. These are the foods I eat. This is the clothes I wear. And he turned to the crowd and he said, whoever is for God, follow me. Now, what we're talking about here is not a God in the sky that loves one tribe over another tribe. What we're talking about is whoever is for love, follow me. Whoever is for inclusion, follow me. Whoever is for oneness, follow me. And his 5 sons followed him. His 5 sons followed him, and they went and they became a little army called the Maccabees. Well, the word Maccabee means hammer. And the important thing about this is that they were a little band of rebels. Now, last year, if you were here, I asked you if you would get in a tribe of rebels somewhere in this church or somewhere else, a tribe of rebels. Just coming to this church is actually a tribe of rebels. The choir is a tribe of rebels. The classes are a tribe of rebels. Everything's a tribe of rebels in this church because we are thinking beyond common. Beyond common. But get in a tribe of rebels somewhere in your life, of like-minded people who can support you to continue thinking beyond common. You know, I'm not promoting this or not promoting it. I'm just going to tell you how I feel about this. On Saturday, we have a big group here. They're called ACN, and they're a big group of multi-level marketers, and they come in and they get themselves all sailed up. I mean, they get themselves confident that they can go out and make sales. And I was thinking about them the other day when I was overhearing what they were saying, and I was thinking, they're teaching our principles. They are a band of rebels who are going out and saying, you know what? I'm going to be a well-off person. I'm going to be a wealthy person. That's a band of rebels. Now, I'm not saying go be an entrepreneur, go be in multi-level marketing, but find something. Find something in which you feel like you are moving beyond common hours in your life. Well, the thing about the Maccabees is their tactics were this. They would run out, beat the bad guys, the Greek army, and then they would retreat. And then they would run out and they'd beat. And that's why they're called the hammers. They would just hammer, and then they would run back. And they'd go out and they'd hammer, and then they'd run back. And that was their tactics. Well, the teaching point for that for us is this. Sometimes we think that we can have a healing in the twinkling of an eye. And I believe we can have a healing in the twinkling of an eye. But more often, it is we have to hammer it. So if you think you're going to do 20 years of I'm not enough with one day's affirmation, maybe it'll happen. But my guess is you're going to have to beat it. You're going to have to use that affirmation over and over and over and over again and begin to work with it in your life. Well, one day, Antiochus is fit to be tied. He says, I'm done. I'm going to just wipe out these Maccabees. I'm going to get the whole Greek army over here. And he does. He brings the whole Greek army. And they set a battle date. And they advertise it. I never understood that, but they advertised the battle date. So they said, on this day, we're going to have a battle. They got up in the morning, and they began to put their armor on. Now look, we do that every time we are going into an area in which we think we do battle. We put our armor on. We put our defensiveness on. We put our blamer on. We put our excuses on. And then we walk out the door to do battle. But we're heavy. We're not connected to divine intelligence. We're heavy. And that's what the Greek army was. They were heavy. And so before they could get their last button clasped on their armor, the Maccabees came and they wiped them out. And that's the end of that part of the story. But then they go back into the beautiful temple. They're victors now. They're not slaves anymore. And they go back into the beautiful temple. And they see what has gone on. They see the blood spattered everywhere. They see the broken pews. They see the ark. And they notice the candle is out. And they do what I hope every one of us will do when we come upon that which upsets us emotionally. They wept. They sat down and they wept. And they wept, and they wept, and they wept, and they wept. And when they were complete with their grief, they had given it time. They didn't try and rush it. They didn't try and put any perky anything on top of it. They just wept. And when they were done, they got their brooms and their mops and their pails, and they went into the temple, and they cleaned, and they rebuilt, and they made it beautiful. And then they walked over to the eternal flame, and they noticed that there was only enough oil for one lighting of the candle. Now, most often when you hear a Hanukkah story, it is about the miracle of the lighting of this candle. I like the other parts, but that's really the whole story of Hanukkah is about this. And here's the most important thing I'm going to say all day, and that is this. They walked over and they saw they had enough for one lighting, and they lit it. They didn't wait and have a meeting about how they should wait until they got 6 days or 4 days or 8 days or 10 days. They didn't worry about it. They didn't worry about the end result. They knew that they had to just take the first step. Let that be the legacy of Hanukkah to each and every one of us. If there is something out there that is calling you to do, take the first step. Light the candle. Don't wait. Maybe it's a book you have. Write 1 page during this Hanukkah season. You have 4 more days. Write 1 page. Maybe it's a song. Maybe it's a poem. Maybe it's a painting. Maybe it's something you've been meaning to do for somebody else. Maybe it's as simple as sending a card to somebody. Take the first step. Light the candle. Let's take this message into prayer. There's only one presence, and that presence is running through me and through you and through all beings right now. So I simply speak my word knowing that that God that hung the sun this morning and the moon last night is the same God that beats my heart and everybody else's heart, that breathes through me. It's the same God. The innermost God and the outermost God is the same God, that God that is harmony itself. So I turn my attention to harmony so that there may be peace in the world. It's that same God we call abundance. And I turn my attention to abundance so those who are homeless have shelter and those who are hungry have food. It's the same God that we call connection. So I turn my attention to all elders this day that they may have connection with somebody. It's the same God that we call joy. And so I turn my attention to children knowing that they hear their own voices giggle today. They find a roly-poly and it makes them happy. I give thanks for this God. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.